There are punishments in Greek myth that feel violent. There are punishments that feel grotesque. And then there is Tantalus. His torment is different. It does not tear the body apart like Tityos. It does not force endless labor like Sisyphus. It does something colder. It places desire within reach, and then takes it away forever. In the underworld, Odysseus sees him standing in water up to his chin. Above him hang heavy branches loaded with fruit, pears, pomegranates, apples, figs, olives. Everything a starving man could want. Everything a thirsty man could beg for. But whenever Tantalus bends to drink, the water vanishes. Whenever he reaches for the fruit, the wind lifts it out of his hands. That image is so powerful that it outlived the rest of the myth. Even now, the very word tantalize carries his name inside it. To be tormented by what seems close, but never becomes yours. And yet the real question is not what his punishment was. The real question is, why? Who was Tantalus, that the Greeks imagined him suffering like this? He was not a monster born outside the human world, not a titan from the first chaos, not some beast that needed to be chained beneath a mountain. He was a king, a ruler of Sipylus in Lydia, or in some traditions, Phrygia, a man connected to power, wealth, lineage. A man so honored that ancient authors describe him as a favorite of the gods, a mortal admitted to their table. That detail matters, because Greek myth is full of heroes who receive gifts from the divine. But Tantalus receives something rarer: proximity. He is close enough to the gods to feast with them, close enough to hear what mortals are not meant to hear, close enough to forget the line between guest and equal. And that is where his story becomes dangerous. In Greek myth, closeness to the gods is never simple privilege. It is a test of proportion. Can a mortal receive favor without mistaking favor for status? Can a human being stand near divine power without trying to possess it? Tantalus, in every major version of the myth, fails that test. But the Greeks did not preserve just one explanation. Some traditions say he revealed divine secrets to human beings. He heard what belonged to heaven and carried it back to earth. Other traditions say he stole nectar and ambrosia, the substances of divine life, and shared them with his companions, as if sacred things could be redistributed like royal gifts. And then there is the darkest version of all, the one that later audiences remember most vividly. Tantalus kills his own son, Pelops, cuts him apart, cooks him, and serves him to the gods at a banquet. That is the version many modern retellings begin with. But the old sources are more complicated than that. Pindar, one of our most important early witnesses, actually pushes back against the cannibal banquet version. He rejects the idea that the gods would eat Pelops and presents a different offense instead. Tantalus, unable to bear his own good fortune properly, steals what belongs to the gods and is ruined by greed. That matters because it tells us something essential about the myth. The core issue is not just cruelty, it is transgression. A mortal taking what is not his. A mortal acting as though divine order can be handled, distributed, tested, or mocked. So Tantalus begins not as a starving ghost, but as a man who had almost everything: rank, wealth, divine favor, and access to what other mortals could only imagine. And still, it was not enough. That is where the fall begins. And then we come to the Banquet of Pelops. Whether told directly, hinted at, or denied and reworked, this version casts the deepest shadow. Imagine the logic of it. A father kills his son. A host serves human flesh to divine guests. A banquet, normally the place of trust, order, and exchange, is turned into a trap. Later writers often explain the act as a test. Tantalus wants to see whether the gods will notice, whether they are truly gods, whether divine perception can be fooled. And that is what makes the scene so revealing. Because the crime is not only murder, not only sacrilege, not only cannibal inversion, it is also arrogance of perception. Tantalus behaves as if he can examine the gods from above, as if he can stage a trial in which heaven becomes the object and he becomes the judge. The gods, of course, are not deceived. In the later tradition, all recoil from the meal. Only Demeter, distracted by grief for Persephone in some tellings, consumes part of Pelops, usually the shoulder. Pelops is then restored, and the missing piece is replaced with ivory. He is not just a man who broke a rule. He is a man who violated hospitality, fatherhood, divine trust, and the basic structure of the feast itself. And from that point onward, his story widens into something even larger. Because Tantalus does not stand alone in myth. He stands at the beginning of a damaged bloodline. He is the father of Pelops, an ancestor of Atreus and Thyestes, a precursor to the house that will produce feasts of revenge, murders within families, children sacrificed to ambition, and curses that move from generation to generation like inherited poison. That does not mean every later crime is his fault in a simple sense. Greek myth is rarely that mechanical, but it does mean that Tantalus becomes one of the great ancestral warnings, a figure whose offense stains the line that comes after him. And this is where the myth stops being only about one man in punishment. So how do the gods answer Tantalus? Not with a quick death, not with a lightning strike, not even, in the most memorable version, with direct bodily destruction. They answer him with a perfect mirror. What did he do in life? He took what was near him and treated it as his own. He stood close to divine privilege and reached too far. He handled sacred things with the appetite of possession. So in death, he is made into appetite itself. Water touches his chin, but does not become drink. Fruit hangs over his head, but does not become food. What he wants is present, what he needs is visible, and yet satisfaction is eternally withdrawn. This is why the punishment of Tantalus is so psychologically modern. It is not only pain, it is the architecture of frustration. To see, to crave, to reach, to fail, again and again and again. In another ancient strand, a great stone hangs above him, always threatening to fall. That version changes the picture, but not the meaning. Tantalus is trapped inside desire without fulfillment. And that is why he matters. Because his myth is not just about what the gods do to a criminal. It is about a question the Greeks never stopped asking. What destroys a human being more completely, pain or appetite without limit? Tantalus had access, favor, status, and nearness to heaven. None of it taught him measure. And in Greek thought, measure matters. So his punishment becomes symbolic in the deepest possible way. He is not merely denied food and drink, he is denied completion. And maybe that is why his image stayed alive for so long. Because everyone understands some version of it. To long for what is almost there. To chase satisfaction and feel it recede. To discover that desire, once ungoverned, can become its own underworld. The Greeks gave that condition a face. A king in water. A starving man under fruit. A soul surrounded by nearness and abandoned by possession. Tantalus. Not simply a sinner. Not simply a cautionary tale, but one of the clearest myths ever told about the catastrophe of having more than enough and still reaching beyond the human limit. Eternal hunger, eternal thirst, not because he was empty, but because he never understood what should have been enough. And that is why Tantalus still stands in the imagination of the West, waist deep in desire, surrounded by abundance, teaching the oldest lesson in Greek myth, that the distance between mortal and divine is not erased by favor, and that when reverence fails, even abundance can become torment forever.